Let me just check for audio.
Should I say things? I don't know.
Yep, you're great.
There you go.
You are great. Okay. So let me get that shot. Okay, so first off, just what prompted the center opening?
Admittedly, I've only been here since July,
Okay.
so I can tell you what I've heard and what I have been told. It was not actually my decision. It was something that I think has been trying to get done for quite a few years, actually.
Mm-hmm.
So the Center for Sexuality and Gender Diversity has actually existed for, I think, in the neighborhood of 10 years. And in that time, it was people doing this work, but not necessarily having a physical open space for students really primarily to come hang out in and have that physical location of a center. And so it was, everything was the right timing. The planets aligned, the stars were whatever in our favor. And so it was a collaborative thing where the Emily Taylor Center moved out of this office. So it used to be under Student Involvement and Leadership Center, SILC, but it was no longer here. And so they moved over to D&E, Diversity and Equity, and they were structured differently, and now they had their own space, and now they're located in Wesco. Because of that, it really opened up the space because there was 2 full-time staff members who were lodged here, so now we had that space. They also was this perfect timing with requesting money from Student Senate to fully fund a full-time, 40-hour-a-week, benefits-eligible, exempt person. That is not me. I mean, it's me now, but it wasn't me who did the first one. Mm-hmm. They hired somebody, that person started, that person was here for a semester, and then they moved on. They found something better, and I think it was like a temporary thing that this person was going to do for us, which was great. And then Student Senate said, hey, we have this other money that has now been allocated for Sexuality and Gender Diversity Center, but is not being used for that person's salary for the next second semester of the year. We can use that to furnish the center. The Student Involvement and Leadership Center, if SILC is willing to give up the space. And so there was some shuffling around between this office, the office next to me, and the ones down to the right of this hallway to say that like that bigger office would no longer be what it was, and that would be repurposed to be the center. It also was really appropriate that it was like on that angle over there, like where the door kind of splits off, and then the hallway with all student club offices. So it was just a perfect location. And so everything happened right. Student Senate said, yes, we'll give you the money. They bought that nice table. They bought like all these other things in there, the TV. We got funding to put in some library books, all of this whole thing. And it was just, here you go, it's happening. Mm-hmm. The commitment from the department has definitely been to say, we will make sure that this space gets utilized in that appropriate way, right? Rather than saying, well, there are some limitations here. And so it was just, I think everyone was on the same page, everything worked well. Mm-hmm. So I don't know, I mean, what prompted it? A long time of making sure we wanted to have this space, and I think what prompts those conversations is saying, LGBTQ students go here, and we want to make sure that they have a space that is a safe, welcoming, affirming space. There are a lot of student spaces on campus where students can just hang out, have lunch, have conversations, and chill. The union is supposed to be the living room of campus, right? When we talk about the union, we talk about the Kansas Union specifically, it's this idea of you should feel at home here. We have all of our student clubs housed in this space. We have a lot of student services housed in this space. And so students should feel at home here, and that's great, and that's wonderful. Anytime any campus has said students should feel at home here, has it been inclusive of LGBTQIA students? And I think that having a place where our queer students can feel like they can be out, they can be open, they can have their gender pronouns respected, they can be who they are without having to hide any part of them, that's what we're looking for. Mm-hmm. And so the center is the living room of all LGBTQIA students, faculty, and staff on campus. We hosted the grand opening, and it's not a living room that fits everyone in there. I mean, if you were there, you knew that it was this space, and people were out in the hallways, and I mean, it was a really good success to have that many people in there. But I think that throughout the day, students who just want to have lunch with a same gender partner and are looking for a place where they can do that without having stares or being spoken about, right, and these whispers and things, this is the space for that. This is also the space where you can come and have a conversation about sexuality or about gender identity, because these are conversations that students want to be having. And they might not feel safe to do that on, I don't know, in a dining hall, right? If they want to eat with their partner, if they want to just talk about the use of their pronouns, right? That's somewhere where we can do that.
Awesome. So let me ask you, are there specific services that are kind of geared towards, or that are associated with the center, or is it just a safe space in addition to, or how does?
So it's funny because the center, so we talk about the Center for Sexuality and Gender Diversity. It's not a standalone center. If you were to, for example, if you were to Google what a standalone LGBT resource center is or looks like on college campuses, you'd find out that it's this space that is all on its own, not associated with anything else. We are not that because we are housed within the Department of Silk, right? So we still have a parent department. We are not our own department. And so we are not a standalone center. I don't know where I was going with this. What was the question?
If there's services.
Yeah, so the Center for Sexuality and Gender Diversity does things, and the services I think that we provide are safe zone training programs for faculty and staff, student safe zone training program. We help out a lot with the events for Gabriel that is mostly run by Spectrum. We program with the other departments or the other offices under the Department of Silk, which is Greek life, leadership programs, non-traditional students, and student clubs and organizations. And so we serve as, between me and our GA, we serve as advisors for LGBTQIA student clubs and organizations. We do a lot of collaborative work with anyone who might be talking about this. And so we work with Residence Life, we work with student counseling, we do work with Watkins Health Center, we work with any faculty who might request a program or a discussion in their classrooms. We do a lot of things by request. It's funny because the services that we provide are really on a case-by-case basis as it becomes necessary. We do a lot of stuff where we might intervene with somebody who says, I've had this experience in housing, or I've had this experience in a classroom, or I want to know, how do I change my name? How do I change my legal name? How do I change gender markers on my transcripts? We work with students who might say, hey, I just need somebody to talk to, and I don't know who is somebody that's affirming over at the counseling center, right? We sit on a lot of committees. We talk with athletics about their diversity committees. We sit on diversity and excellence, diversity and equity committees and work groups. And I'm just looking at my list of things. I'm like cheating now. We also do programming. We really try to work very closely with the Office of Multicultural Affairs, which is right down the way here, to make sure that we're doing programming that is intersectional and that is paying attention to both gender and race. We work very closely with the Emily Taylor Center for Gender and Equity, or God, they changed their name. The Emily Taylor Center. I'm sure there's much more. We have the gender neutral restroom housing map on our website. We work with design and construction to say, hey, where's the next gender neutral restroom going to be put up? Whenever you build a residence hall, are you thinking about that? We do a lot of different things. If there is one service that we provide, or if there is something that we say that we do, it's definitely all LGBT related work, right? I think on our website it says that we are the hub of LGBTQIA issues, concerns, and topics at KU. Mm-hmm. So we really are.
So you do it all.
Yeah, I mean, I think it becomes, I tell people I am an expert in nothing, and I know a little tiny bit about a lot of different things like architectural codes, right? At this point in my career, I've learned crazy things about what building codes are like, because we have to talk about that in order to be able to talk intelligently about restrooms in buildings.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know anything about architecture, but I know a little bit about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So you mentioned that, so kind of what spurred the center opening, or what helped, was the allocation of the money from that position. So looking towards the future, is that position going to be filled, or how is funding going to continue?
So that
to support
position
the center?
that position was filled by me. So they are paying me to be here, which is wonderful. I really like getting paid to work. The funding for the center is interesting because it doesn't take a lot of funding to just open the door, so there was an initial cost, but it doesn't take a lot of funding to keep the doors open. Other than turning the lights on and stuff, and that's definitely something that the Silk department pays for. The salary for this position is actually fully funded by Student Senate, and so if Student Senate ever decides that they don't want me around here, that might be a problem. But Student Senate really has stepped up to say, no, this is important enough to us, and so we will fund this. We're going to pay for this. Student Senate pays for quite a number of student fees and student services and resources on campus. This is one of those. And so I don't think that we're ever in danger of running out of funding, because the students have really said this is important enough to them to where they're going to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. So I looked at the campus pride index for KU, so I checked that out.
Recently?
Yes.
Oh, good.
Because I had noticed there was on the website it said 4.5 for KU, and then I went and it's 2.5.
Yeah, it is.
So is that?
So I have no idea when it was 4.5, and if anything, on my list of stickies, one of these is definitely to update the website. We recently filled out and got our 2.5. We recently filled out the assessment, which they make you do every year. And this is the first year that it was really different, because I haven't done it here, but I've done it in my previous institutions, because it does tend to be the benchmark for all LGBTQ centers on campus. Interestingly enough, if you go to bestcolleges.com, and they also do a similar list, KU comes in at number 13 out of, I think, 30. So we're not bad on that list.
Mm-hmm.
They also say Arizona State is number 1. So, who knows, right? I mean, the problem with the Campus Pride Index is a lot of the way in which they do the assessment. The way they ask the questions is really difficult to give positive answers without being misleading. And so when we answered the questionnaire, we erred on the side of caution, because what we don't want to do is give students who are looking for a really inclusive campus the wrong impression. A lot of the questions today tend to be about the services we offer to transgender students. Mm-hmm. And KU has its work cut out for us. We do a lot to be inclusive of LGBT students. It's the T where we are still struggling. And that's true for colleges across the nation, actually. It's funny because I've been doing this for a while, and 5 years ago, the big question was whether or not we covered sexual orientation, gender identity, and gender expression in our non-discrimination policies. KU's been doing that for quite a number of years now, mm-hmm. despite the fact that the state of Kansas does not require it. Right. And so that was always a huge positive for us. That was 5 years ago, and so this topic has really advanced a lot, and so now we're being asked questions about, do you have gender-neutral housing? Whenever you have gender-neutral restrooms, are they easily accessible? Are they in public spaces? Where are they? How do you get to them, right? And so, for example, we've got one restroom in this on the 4th floor of the Kansas Union. It's actually it's down the hall. You could probably you passed it, right? So it's down the hall from here. However, if you'd never before set foot in the Kansas Union, how easy would it be to find? Mm-hmm. Right? that's a little bit where we fall short. I literally don't know how to make this stop.
Oh, it's fine.
Great.
It's okay.
And so we're working on that, right? Questions like, does every building have a gender neutral facility in the building? The answer is no, because there's a lot of, these are kind of loaded questions, right? Because for a campus that is 150 years old, there's buildings that are here that were here 150 years ago, where the plumbing is, old, and the buildings are old, and the codes are old, and I'm sure these buildings have been retrofitted to be up to codes and things, but that's not something that you can ever really add a restroom where one did not exist, right?
Yeah.
That's $1 million project. And so the hope is that the buildings that go up, we're being mindful in that way, but even then, it's not something that, for example, architectural codes dictate. It's not something that we have to have one, right? We have to be more mindful as a university to say we are committed to doing this every time, rather than, I know, for example, whenever residence life buildings open, student housing has said, yes, we want all of our halls to have at least a few gender neutral options or open to everybody options.
Okay.
That's something that student housing is ahead of the curve on. Whether or not we have people in construction and design that are ahead of the curve is really, case by case basis. And so some individuals are really aware, others are not. So it just becomes an issue of how inclusive are we being universally, right? Like every time, consistently inclusive. And I think that's where our 2.5 comes in, because we are inclusive in some areas, but not consistently across all of campus. And so when it asks us questions like, does every building, we have to say no, because it's not true. When it asks us questions like, will every building that's going to go up have one? Again, the answer is no, because we can't guarantee that, because it's not written into policy. When it asks us questions like, where will a transgender student be housed in your housing, right? We have policies in place for that, but it's not something that's easily accessible or something that is written into policy for student housing. So we have to be honest about that. It's interesting because we really want to make sure that we represent KU in a way that says, yeah, you should come here, because we want you to come here, right? I think anyone who works for the university really believes in being a Jayhawk and the Jayhawk spirit and the whole thing of how, yeah, rock chalk and all, the whole thing, right? I didn't go here, but I didn't go here. I'm learning the lingo. And KU is a beautiful, awesome, amazing campus to be at, and I think people should know that. But if you're looking for something that will absolutely, hands down, be affirming, ask you questions on the admissions form, we're not there yet. And so I think 2.5 represents us accurately.
So kind of going off of that, I mean, just in your opinion, if you'd like to speak to this, just kind of about the current climate for LGBTQ community here, in students and faculty for that matter, and just kind of your opinion on that.
So I've literally been in the state of Kansas since July 1st. So in a very small window of time. Yeah. And this is, I mean, all of these things are just my opinion. I mean, nothing I say is really based on any kind of fact. I think that Lawrence is a much more accepting community than you'd probably find outside of Lawrence in the state of Kansas. And that's actually something that is the reputation that Lawrence has. When I was first moving here and told people I was going to KU, and after they got over the initial reaction of, oh my God, why would you do that? They said, well, where in Kansas? Lawrence. Okay, well, Lawrence is the only place you can live, right? And I heard that constantly, and I think that it really does live up to that, right? We moved here from Colorado, so we drove all of western Kansas, and every time you stop in one of those gas stations, you're kind of like, oh, I'm terrified. So being in Lawrence is much nicer. And I think it's, you're closer to Kansas City and kind of that bigger city feel that tends to give people that feeling of inclusiveness and acceptance and diversity, right? I think KU as a university is incredibly accepting, incredibly diverse in terms of sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression. The students here, and this is true of students everywhere, right? Like students keep getting younger and younger. I stay the same age, but they get younger and younger, which also means that they are much more educated. They are living in a world where students entering the university today are born in 1997, which, think about that. They're entering this university, they were born in 1997, which means they have always lived in a world where we've been talking about queer issues, right? They've always lived in a world where DOMA has existed, Don't Ask, Don't Tell has existed, and while those are not positive things, this has always been a politicized issue. We've always been talking about gay marriage. Their entire lives we've been talking about gay marriage. That's not true for when I was born. That's not true for when a lot of faculty and staff were born. And so the student that we get today is much more educated, much more inclusive, and really has a better understanding because of the Tumblr and things of the diversity around them. And so I think KU's student body, just from my perspective of the last few months, and really it's only been like the 1 month that they've been in school, is really opening and accepting. You know, they are an inclusive generation of human beings that is really empowering to see. And we are also living in a world where everyone knows somebody who is openly gay, right? We're living in a world where you see gay, lesbian characters on primetime television. You might not see transgender characters on primetime TV, but you know, Netflix is about to take over the universe, and so if you've got Netflix, these characters are all around us. This is always something that's been happening. I remember when, you know, Ellen DeGeneres came out on national television, right? Like that was a big deal. It's never been that big a deal for these students, right? We have these characters that are always out there, and it's in the media, and it's in prime time, and it's something that's been talked about, and we've seen LGBT celebrities, right? It's a different time. It's a very different time to live in, and I think that has really made it an inclusive environment, even politically. We passed marriage equality in the Supreme Court this summer, right? How could it not be a different time? How could it not be inclusive? KU is offering domestic partner benefits to everybody, right? Same-sex couples now get benefits based on marriage equality, right? And we're in the state of Kansas. I feel like there are people who grew up in the state of Kansas who never thought that would happen. I grew up in the state of Texas, and I can't believe that I can get gay married in Texas. I feel like that's crazy. Like, I never thought I would see that. And I'm not that old. So there's that. Like, I'm not. And even in my lifetime that I didn't think that would happen. Yeah, I think this is a really inclusive time. And so KU does not feel like a very conservative, closed off, closed-minded campus. It does have that feeling of we embrace and care about diversity. It could also be the circles that I run in that I feel like this. You know, I mean, I hang out with Office of Multicultural Affairs, Emily Taylor Center, Diversity and Equity Office. I mean, what I get paid to do for a living gives me a very specific perspective. I think if you ask my wife, she might say something different. But from my perspective, and obviously knowing my biases, I think it's great here. I went to undergrad at a very similar institution. I went to Texas A&M, 10 years ago, right? It was very different, and there you did feel like it was very conservative, and that has probably a lot to do with the time and the fact that it's Texas, but you know, Texas A&M and KU have a very similar feel in terms of structure, size, and tradition. And so I remember what it was like being a lesbian at that time in College Station, Texas, and there's a very different, palpable feeling of conservatism, closed-mindedness, and almost uneasiness, and I hesitate to use the word danger, but really unsafe, right? You're more mindful of who you are around, where you are. I don't feel like that here at KU. So maybe that's just where I'm coming from, saying I know what it's like to feel that way, so I also know what it's like not to, and I don't here. So I don't know if students would echo that at all, but that's also my generation. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I've heard that from students too. And you raised a really good point, because I do feel like they do grow up with that.
They do.
And that's huge. You know, it makes that conversation is open.
Yep.
And they're part of it. So
absolutely, I think we can all, some of us, I mean some of us not being students, right? Not anyone in the ages of like the traditional 18-year-old entering college right now, but I mean anyone who is 25 and older right now remembers not talking about this. This is not something you brought up at the dinner table. Mm-hmm. You do not talk about LGBT things. You do not talk about even like Will and Grace, right, was kind of this taboo subject that's how you knew who was cool. If you were watching Will and Grace, then like, oh, then that means you're cool with the gay thing. Mm-hmm. It's so different now. Mm-hmm. You know, you can watch ABC Family and there's gay characters. You watch any television show and there are gay characters. GLAAD, I think it's GLAAD, Gay Lesbian Anti-Defamation, GLAAD. They put out a list of LGBT characters on television, in movies, and then like independent films and things. That list is huge. I remember when it was, I mean, like it filled up one page, right? Today, you go online, and I did this last week with a friend, and it is huge. And there's some of these shows that I'm like, I have no idea what this is, but I like that there's someone gay on it, right? There's also another list of characters who, so there was gay characters, or gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender characters, and then there's a list of celebrities or actors who were LGBT but not playing LGBT roles. And that list is huge now too, because people are more comfortable to come out. Right, we've got out politicians, right? We had out politicians in the state of Texas. I mean, that was crazy, right? I mean, we've got senators coming out. We've got all kinds of people who are finally starting to serve as these role models that are not just celebrities. These are like real life people doing real life work. It's an interesting time to be alive because you can be LGBT and do anything, and that's not something that we were taught before, and now we do have those examples. You can be an LGBT engineer, you know, or a librarian or whatever it is. You can do that. Yeah, it's a crazy different time, which is not to say we don't have a lot of work to do. I think students and people in general kind of tend to think the work is done, right? But we only barely got the center, right? Like it's 2015 and we finally have this physical space, and that's wonderful and that's great. But we have a long ways to go. We're not doing nearly enough to really respect this idea of gender diversity, because we talk about sexuality and gender diversity, and so much of the time we focus on sexuality. We focus on what it is to be gay, lesbian, bisexual, and what it means and how that's different. And that's an important conversation to continue to have, because it is still something that people are being bullied based on, and people are homeless over, right? Like 40% of homeless youth are LGBT. You know, this is still a huge problem that we need to continue to address. However, we have always, this is a huge generalization, for a long time we have ignored the T. We have ignored gender fluidity, we have ignored gender queer, we have ignored people who live outside of the gender binary. And so now I feel like that time is coming, where we're finally paying more attention, where we're not ignoring the voices of trans human beings who say, hey, we've been here from the beginning, right? I mean, you think about the Stonewall movie that just came out last Friday. There's all this controversy about, I mean, so I mean, the LGBT community as a whole, right? Like, not like there's a spokesperson for the community, but as a whole, the community has really kind of turned it on the movie and turned on the film and said, no, we're boycotting this film about LGBT rights movement, about the beginning of the movement. We're going to boycott the film because it does not accurately represent this voice, the transgender, people of color voice. And I think 10 years ago, we wouldn't have thought that way. And it's hugely empowering to think that now finally as a community, we're saying we will not stand for the ignoring of a trans voice. I think that's important. I think that's huge. I think that's wonderful. And I think finally, right? So that's a lot of where we're going, and I think the universities will all catch up eventually, but we're working on it. So yeah, it's good.
Yeah. That's great.
I said a lot.
You said
I
a lot of great things.
Oh, good.